Hello and welcome everyone to the March 2023 Integration Down Under. I do apologize that we didn't miss January and February, but like everything else, life gets busy and trying to find people to speak and things like that didn't quite work out. So we look like we're going to have this one this week, and we might also have another one next week. So watch the Twitter and everything. I'm working with Mick Badrin to see if he wants to do a session next week. So I will put that up shortly as soon as I find out the details about that. But tonight, let's see, we've got our organizing Martin, Dan, Mick, Wagner, and myself. And tonight we have Mark Brimble. He's been doing BizTalk as long as I can remember. I've known Mark for a fair while. Now he converted a lot of his BizTalk stuff to Azure. And one of the things he used in that conversion was the SFTP on Blob Storage. So he's going to share that with us tonight. So let me get rid of my slides and add Mark's slides to the stream. And I will get rid of, and if Mark, you just want to say hi, and then I'll get rid of the cameras and just leave the slides up there.
Okay, so we're on, Bill?
Yep.
Oh, thanks, Bill, for asking me to talk on this topic. And before I start, I should actually just say happy birthday from everyone to you, Bill. Seeing it's your birthday today. So today I'm going to talk on a topic that won't take just trying to move my slides and it won't move. Just bear with me 1 minute. It works. Okay, I've got to be on the main screen. So today, sorry about that, everybody, but today I'm going to talk on accessing Azure Blob Storage via the SFTP protocol. So this is fairly new. It had been on preview probably about for the best part of last year, and it went GA sometime in January, I think. And I think you didn't have to pay for it until the end of January. So at Bid1, we have started to use it, and we are using it a little bit live in production, and we intend to use it a lot more. So this will be just some of my personal experiences, and just what we've done. So just to begin with, I'll give a very quick refresher about traditional SFTP and how integration people would have used SFTP or FTP servers in the past. Then I'll just briefly talk about some of the drivers for why Bid1 wanted to use SFTP on blob storage in Azure. And then I'll give a demo of the setup of SFTP on blob, and I'll show some of the gotchas I found when I followed it. Most of the Microsoft Learn articles in that respect are very good if you just follow those. And then finally, I'm going to make some comments about disaster recovery, because at the moment that's prime in my mind. So what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to very quickly do the first step of the demo, because it takes a little while for it to. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes for it for everything to happen. And in my experience, even though it says it's deployed, It then takes about another 5-10 minutes before it starts to behave well. So that's why I'm going to do that first. So the steps that you go through, and I know this is a little bit out of order, I haven't given an introduction to what we're doing. The very first thing you need to do is you need to create a general purpose V2 storage account. And to be able to enable SFTP on blob storage, you need to actually then upgrade that storage account to Data Lake V2. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the other aspects that are down there later on. So let's just move on to the demo. So it's just a setup of preliminaries. And you'll see here, this is on the screen, you should now see a demo storage account that I've set up. You'll notice that it's your just storage V2. If you look at the containers, when I did the DevOps of this, I set up some blobs. What we do is we chose to use a blob or a container for each customer, and that'll become clear why we did that as we go along in the demo. You'll notice down this side at the moment, there's nothing down here about SFTP, so that's not possible on your typical V2 storage. The other thing that we should look at is just trying to find the I'll look at that later on. So the first step that you come to if you've got your V2 storage is that you have to enable hierarchical namespace. So the important thing for being able to enable the SFTP storage, you've got to enable this hierarchical namespace. So if you click into here, I must admit I haven't actually worked out yet how to get the DevOps to do this bit. That's still outstanding. So you have to go through a few steps here where you actually have to agree to things. And I think one of the things is because Data Lake Gen 2 storage can be a bit expensive. So we're going to accept that. That should go away. And then I've got to agree to the changes. Just shows I haven't done this for a while. And then in step 2, what you have to do is you have to validate your storage account. I have actually done this on quite a busy storage with lots and lots of containers. It didn't take that long. I'm not sure what would come up with the validation if it didn't like you. As you can see, it's taking a little bit of time. It's taking a lot longer than normal. Okay, so it's done. And then in the final step, which is going to take a little while, it takes about 3 minutes or so, I'm going to just then upgrade the account to Data Lake Gen 2, and also that will enable hierarchical namespace. So let's go back to the demo while that runs. Okay, that's not quite what I want to do, but in mind. Okay. So let's just consider what the use cases for SFTP for Bid1. I would imagine it'd be very similar to most enterprises. And generally what most people are using SFTP for is to pick up files securely or to drop off files securely. So what this picture says, I think it comes from one of the Microsoft Learn Me articles. You can imagine that you've got a user who's got a file who wants to send it to you. You encrypt it either with an SSL certificate or a key file that secures the file. You transport it over the internet, and at the other end, someone else picks up the secure file, and they either decrypt it knowing the SSL password, or if you're using SSL keys, they will decrypt that same file. They've then got the file, and the idea is that nobody in the middle here can actually pick up that file inadvertently. So in the case of Bid1, it so turns out that we have finished our migration from a data center in Brisbane for Bid1. That's where all our stuff is. We've finished the migration of that to Azure fairly recently, and the only thing that's remaining is the only piece of infrastructure that's remaining for us that's on the ground is hosted for us by Bidfood Australia, and this is an SFTP FTP server. This SFTP server is very old, and it would have been earmarked for upgrade if we weren't moving it to Azure. And it's one of the reasons why we started this project, because we considered that because this is not core infrastructure for Australia, but it is used by Bid1, there was a risk in us maintaining that. So we actually needed to look at options, or I was tasked at looking at options of hosting something in Azure ourselves. We have, at the same time, we were starting to get a lot of requests from customers that wanted to change from FTP to SFTP. So we have a lot of customers that have been using FTP for probably 10, 20 years. All of a sudden they're coming to us wanting to use SFTP transport instead. We also had, at the same time, we had one of our Bidfood companies elsewhere in the world that wanted to be able to see what we call catalog files. These catalog files are very large pricing files. They could be anywhere up to 5 gig big, maybe about 1 gig big. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to look at these files and confirm that some of the products were there and what prices had actually been pulled at the time. Currently, we store these on an Azure Blob, and we couldn't give them access to the Azure Blob directly. And so enabling SFTP on top of this was deemed to be quite a good solution for us. The picture that you're seeing on the slide there is your typical infrastructure that you might have seen when you were operating BizTalk, when you were running BizTalk Server. I've seen this at many companies. So what they tend to do is they have a SFTP server sitting in their demilitarized zone. So it's outside it. There's a firewall between that and the domain. And this then is used to drop off or pick up files to external parties. On the other side of the firewall in the domain you would have a BizTalk server, which is the only thing that could actually pull stuff from this FTP server and then distribute to other applications around the domain. The BizTalk server normally would be parsing the files as well. So that was a normal set I've seen many times. And what we did is we replaced the BizTalk server here with Azure components, Azure functions or Azure logic apps. So as I said, over the last 5 years, Bidfood has been moving all its components from Bidfood Australia's service. We used to have everything based there for the whole world, to the cloud. Now that 5-year plan has finished. And the other thing that you may be aware of, we no longer run a BizTalk server either. So we've shut down our BizTalk server. So all our EDI stuff is now also running in Azure. So this old SFTP FTP server is the last remaining bit of on-premise infrastructure that we support. So that's just a picture of our website, which is used all over the world. And as I said, I'm not going to show a picture of BizTalk because I don't want to talk about BizTalk anymore. So Bidfood no longer uses BizTalk server either. So what would our SFTP solution look like? At the moment, we're actually for some of the old interfaces, we're using the SFTP server on premise. But what this picture shows is what our solution will look like once we've shifted to this SFTP on blob storage. So effectively, the users will send and pick up SFTP servers from the blob storage. In the middle of this, we will actually have a firewall. So we will actually restrict by IP address from the users. So externally, the users will access the blob storage via SFTP. Internally, the Azure components will just use normal blob methods to access it. So before we set up or embarked on this project, I was asked to reconsider the governance around our SFTP FTP service. And what I did is we sat down and formulated a few rules that Bid1 would use. So what we said was that customer access must be restricted to only the SFTP folders and no one else. And in terms of SFTP on blob, this really means access to a container. So it's actually at the container level, and then you can find the folders for that customer further down below the container level. We also made a rule that all files must be short-lived with a lifetime of less than 4 days. And we said that and this was primarily because we didn't want the server to be used as an archive location. I don't know what you've found before, but I've commonly found that an SFTP or FTP server is used for all sorts of sins, and people like to archive stuff on there for a long time. The reason why we didn't want to do this is because we wanted to try and keep the cost of storage down. Data Lake V2 storage can get quite expensive if you've got a large. So effectively, what we're saying is we want to use this SFTP layer on blob. We just want to use it as a sort of a way of transporting files, not archiving files. We set up some conventions around usernames and also on the names of the containers, just to make the DevOps a bit easier and also make it a bit clear what's going on. And as I said before, we made a rule that only external users will use SFTP to access the blob containers, whereas internal users will access the blob storage with blob methods. And finally, the last thing we said that we will put firewall inclusions will be enabled for all the connections. This slide, it just repeats what I've said, and I'll just put it there. If anyone's going to be looking at the slides later on, they've got a point of reference. So before we go back to the demo, I'll just quickly, briefly talk about the costs. I have actually trimmed this down a bit. The hierarchical, if you enable hierarchical namespace, it can become quite expensive if you're actually storing a lot of data. So I think the cost there is about $1.60 odd per month for the storage. It balloons out very quickly if you go up to 20, 30 gigabytes of data. So we're aiming to try and keep the amount of data that we're storing there for a long length of time down to about a gigabyte. May not be successful, but we'll see what happens. The other bit is that when you enable the SFTP protocol, which I'll show you very soon, it's not cheap. It's not expensive either. It's about 50 cents New Zealand an hour. That comes out to be about $360 a month. So that's not bad. It's not good. You're probably paying a lot more if you're maintaining an SFTP or FTP server. Okay, so we'll go back to the demo now, and I'll just show you how to add SFTP support, and then I'll show you how you assign the local users to containers, and I'll show a few gotchas there. I'll then go on to set up the firewall. All right. So once again, I have to apologize. I haven't worked out how to do the DevOps for the SFTP. That's still got to be done. So if we refresh,
Mark, I think all you have to do is turn on the hierarchical namespace.
Yeah, the hierarchical namespace, as you see, I did that before.
Yeah, no, but in the DevOps, it's a property.
All right. Yep.
And basically, so is the SFTP.
Yeah.
So, because I just exported one while you were talking, and the two flags that I noticed in there was a enable hierarchical namespace and a enable SFTP, and that should that should be all you'd have to do to add for your DevOps side.
Okay, I will try that at some stage. That's good stuff for everybody. So once you've got this hierarchical namespace, you'll see there's another option here for SFTP that wasn't there before, and very simple process. Enable SFTP. This happens reasonably quickly, and then you're at the point of where you want to add your local user. Once again, this is a very good experience. You can either use an SSH password or an SSH key pair. I haven't actually tried the SSH key pair, but I'm pretty sure it's a fairly similar experience. So you'll just add your key. Let's have a look. I think it's probably going to come from, I would hope that you've got a choice to use an existing key. I would hope you can pull it from a key vault, but I'm sure that you can. But that's not what I'm going to do here. Just for the purpose of this, I'm going to create a SSH password. And I haven't put the username in specifically yet. So let's try. Yep. So we'll go for SFTP New Zealand real time. Must be through. Yes, that's right. It can only contain characters. And then in the drop down, you will actually get a list of all your containers that you want to. As I said, the permissions are created at the container level, not at the folders underneath the container level. And then we need to set up some permissions. I'm going to use all. In our case, we do actually trim down some of these. We quite often leave the delete turned off, and we might only have people doing read as well. But for our case, we will do that. Now, this is took me a little while to work out what's going on here. It so turns out that if you just actually don't put anything for the landing directory, it doesn't take you to the top of the blob container. You get quite a bizarre error. Neither if you actually put in just backslash or dot or anything like that. What you have to do is you have to put the name of the blob container at the very least as the landing directory. So we'll go ahead, and that took me quite a while to work that out. It is actually in, I think they did. Yeah, why is that not adding? Oh, go back. Oh, this is what you don't want on your. Wondering. Let me just refresh the screen. Never had this happen to me before. Okay, there we go. So I don't quite know what happened there before, but this actually highlights one of the points. One of the difficult points is that if you're using SSH passwords, it's only at this point that you can capture the SSH password. If you don't do that, what you find is that if you don't capture at this point, your only option is to regenerate the password again. If you're going to create a DevOps process for this, you'll have to try and capture this as an output, and then store it away in a key vault somewhere. Okay, so we've done that, and you'll see that we have actually created this rather unusual user called SFT demo, and it has access to the to one of the containers. So I'll just show you that we can actually access this via SFTP. So I'm going to use an SFTP client. I'll just copy this a little bit easier. The reason why I want to show you this SFTP client, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you that once I turn the firewall on, that then the we can no longer access it via SFTP, because we're coming from an IP address that's not allowed. Just change that password. Right. So we're accessing our blob store via SFTP on port 22. So let's just, and there you go. We're accessing the blob store at the container level. I should have put a file in there just to show you that that's where we're heading up. But for the purpose of this demo, I just want to show you what happens when we enable the firewall. So what I'm going to do is we'll go down to the network settings, and in the network settings, you get a choice here to enable. It's recommended. I'll just mention that as far as network routing is concerned, the Microsoft LearnMe strongly suggests that you use Microsoft routing and none of the other routings. But I guess they're there for other people to use. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to enable the firewall, and effectively what I'm going to do is this is my own local client, I'm going to save it, and once it's on, it will mean that I can't access the blob store from my SFTP client. So I'm picking that. Immediately I get permission denied, authorization failure, as you'd expect. So I go in here and I'm going to add my client. So for external users, we will be collecting their public-facing IP address, and we will be restricting them, as well as username, password. We'll be restricting them by IP. Once again, that's one of the Microsoft. Okay, this takes a little while to come in. Maybe I've got to go, or maybe I'll just close the session. There we go. Sorry, we're back again. So the next issue I'm going to show you is, okay, so you can actually add the firewall for SFTP clients coming in. What happens for your Azure internal Azure components, such as logic apps and Azure functions. And this is something that you have to think about. And I have here a very simple logic app, which is pointing at the, well, it's pointing at the real-time blob, which I should have, okay, that's still going to work. So this is one of the other blobs that was there. And it was, this, just trust me, this was actually connecting to that blob perfectly all right. And you can see that it's been connecting for a while. Just it's finding the blob store, and we could, it would pick up if something's added to the blob store. If we refresh it, we immediately see that as soon as we turn on the firewall, it's failed. Now, why is that? So you say, oh, it's because you haven't actually enabled the Azure components. Well, you're half right. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that. So if we actually go in and we select, because we've actually allowed all Azure that are trusted, if we go in and we enable, looking for Microsoft Logic App workflows, and I don't know, we just say all in the current group, we go save. Trust me, when you do that, it just doesn't, it doesn't actually allow you to get through. To cut a long story short, that blob storage was using access tokens to access the blob store. What you need to do is you need this, once you've got the firewall on, it only seems to work with managed identities. I'm not going to go through and actually enable managed identity on my, well, actually, maybe I could. Let's have a look. I think I've got managed identity enabled on this logic app. I'll just state it because it's probably, don't want to talk for too long. Yeah, the important point is that you must use managed identity on your Azure components that are going to connect to that blob store once you've enabled the firewall. Okay, so that's enough for the demo. I'll just bring that down and we'll start the slideshow again. This time I'll start it from the current slide. Okay, so I hope everyone can see that demo slide. Just to finish up, I'll talk a little bit about disaster recovery. I've only just got to this. As I said to you, we are using this in production for some internal stuff we're doing. It's for the customer that actually wants to access catalogs via SFTP. And that's working well for them. They can go in and have a look at the catalogs whenever they like. The next step for us, now that we've got this working, is to start to move all the customers that use SFTP on our Australian server, is to move them to use this SFTP and blob store. So that's going to be a process, because we have to contact those customers. We have to find out what their IP address that's coming in, they're coming in on. We have to tell them that they've got to change to a URL and a different username and password. So that process is going to happen. But one of the things that we've begun to look at is what happened at the moment. Our storage is actually located, our Azure storage is located in Australia East. It naturally gets replicated to Australia Southeast. But unlike other Azure storage options, surprisingly, at the moment, we read the statement up the top, failover of storage accounts with hierarchical namespace is not supported at this time. So this is a little bit of a blow for us in that we really need to have some way of bringing some way of failing over if a problem occurred. I would hope that the statement means that failover will occur at some stage, will be enabled. I also found another comment in the talking about Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage from Microsoft, where they state in the event of a disaster that affects the primary, Microsoft will manage the failover. So I'm going to try and find out what that actually means in the near future. But I got to admit I'm a little bit disappointed in the disaster recovery story. You probably can think of ways of doing that. It's going to be very difficult to fail over manually to some other data store because, of course, as I showed you, SSL passwords, you can't specify what that SSL password is. So we're probably the only option would be to use a key instead. Okay, with that, I think that I have just about come to the end. So if anybody's got any questions, Bill, they're welcome to ask them.
I don't see any questions out there. I would like to go over sometime with you on the difference in pricing between Data Lake and the normal storage, because when I ran the pricing calculator, it showed $1 difference for 1,000 gigabytes.
Right. Okay.
So,
all right.
So
I think it's just the SFTP is the one that gives you the cost. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but because from what I was told, and I've been told, is that the only difference between Data Lake and storage is the fact that it can expand past a certain threshold, because Data Lake is just a bunch of storage accounts. I am interested in the failover stuff. I'm going to have to reach out to the Microsoft folks and figure out what's going on with that, because it doesn't make any sense. So because of the if it's just because of the hierarchical namespace. Yeah. So, and I even found, like you said, with the passwords, even if you use the PowerShell to create the account, it doesn't let you specify the password. It returns you the password as the result of the command. I
tried that too, Bill.
I figured you might have.
Yeah.
Aaron Kim's got a question. Let me just read it. SFTP support on blob storage has always been considered to be a game changer when enabled. Now that you've been using it, what do you feel the biggest advantages of accessing blobs via SFTP compared to the old way?
That's a really good question. I think it's quite neat, the fact that you can internally access the data, the files, via normal Azure Blob methods, whereas your users can then come in and can come in via SFTP protocol. To be honest, I'm sitting there looking at how I know our old SFTP FTP server works, and if you can imagine 20 years of absolute rubbish going through there, it is quite fresh to start a new set of containers. And yes, I think it's quite neat. The SFTP transport on Blob. if it had been there 5 years ago, we do a lot of data transfers from our ERPs to our feed our website. And at the time, this didn't exist, and we wanted to put all the data in Blob Store. What we designed at that time was an Azure relay, which would actually connect the ERPs that are on the ground, their file systems, with the Blob Store, and that's totally custom. So I think it's actually, I was showing it to the guy who actually wrote all that stuff for us, and he said, "Oh, that's really good, because now you've got a way of securely transporting stuff from on-premise to the cloud." I think that's probably the biggest game changer. I think people have tried to do file copies from Azure to on-premise folders. I've tried it myself. I've never found that to be very satisfactory or secure. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest game changer, being able to securely transfer files from the ground to the cloud. So it's a new way in, and it's straight into Azure Blob Storage, which is excellent.
I can add my 2 cents into this one for you, Aaron. One of my clients had their managed service provider work almost 5 weeks trying to set up a FTP, SFTP service in their data center on a highly available cluster, so that it couldn't fail. And at the end of the 5 weeks, we've had 3 failures so far that have lost data in the highly available configuration. So not the best approach. And basically, my feelings about running SFTP servers or FTP servers is that I will do almost anything in this world to keep from doing it. So if I can do it on storage, I will do it every single time on storage. It's just that the FTP protocol especially is that it is so old, and so you have to do so many things to guarantee you get the whole file and you don't get partial files and all that kind of stuff. SFTP is a little bit better, but FTP is the worst. So that's why moving things to the SFTP protocol on storage to me just makes so much more sense. I can also get rid of polling, because I can use the event grid on storage to identify when a file arrives. So again, other things that I want to do for that. And I can also, with a little bit of work in the event gridding, I can actually notify my customers when I've dropped a file on the SFTP storage, because I can actually get an event grid message, take it into an application, reformat it, and send it to the client that says you have a file on this SFTP endpoint. So yeah, again,
that's a very good point. Yeah.
So that you don't have to poll.
Yeah, and there's actually no way to do that in the old world. Well, it's very difficult to tell someone.
Yeah, a few of the FTP servers I've played. Yeah, the few of the FTP servers I've played with do have a notification type thing, but it's extremely hard to use. So
yeah, so we're certainly looking to move everything from our on-premise world and onto that server. Although at the moment, yeah, as I said, the DR story is the one thing that's giving us a few. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, Dan here. Just a quick question. You said that for the Azure services to access it, it has to use a managed identity. Does it matter if it's a user assigned or a system-based managed identity? Can you use either one?
I've only used it with system assigned. I haven't used it with user assigned, but I see no reason why user assigned wouldn't work. I'm not sure why they've decided to not allow access tokens, but that just means it's going to hurry us up to go through all our logic apps and change them all to managed identity. Yeah. So the answer is I don't know, but I would think user assigned would work as well. I've only tried it with system. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got all of the templates for Bicep or ARM that when you create your logic app with your either managed identity or system signed identity, it will then go through and add them to the appropriate storage account or key vault or app config as part of the deployment process. It does all of that as part of the deployment. So every time you add a new logic app, you don't have to manually do it. It does it through the deployment process. You just need your Azure DevOps to have that. The Azure DevOps service account needs to have user access control privileges to be able to do that. So, any other? All the questions that I've seen out there so far. Haven't seen anything else. I'm assuming, Aaron, that answered all your questions. Ooh, we've got. Let me just go back to my slides. And go. We've been through the questions, and then so basically, thank you, Mark, for presenting for us tonight. It was a very good topic, and I think there is definitely a few things that could be gotchas, especially that home directory thing could be definite a gotcha piece in there. And so what I'm thinking is that if you use like the PowerShell to create the user account and then get the password out of that, you could then shove it into Key Vault via the PowerShell, so that you'd have it stored into Key Vault so that you could access it later on through Key Vault. But no, and I'm going to reach out to the storage group and find out about the hierarchical storage failover stuff.
Yeah, well, if you find out, I'm probably going to approach them once I come back from holiday.
Yep. So that
if you find something out, let me know.
Yeah, I will. I've just got to find the right people to reach out to. But that would be good. I'll also have a look and see, because the other thing you might be able to do is use, like in the Australia East data center, it's got zone redundancy for storage. And a big advantage to that is that it doesn't actually cost you anything to move the data, because the data stays inside the same data center, just a different zone in that data center, which is supposed to have separate connectivity and separate power and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a separate data center. So that would also help with some of the costs around that geo redundancy for that. So, okay, thanks everyone, and I think that's probably it for tonight. And I will end the broadcast now, and we'll see everybody hopefully next week. I'll check with Mick and see get that organized. If not, it'll be sometime in April. Thank you very much.
Okay, see you later.